The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the vast darkness between them. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives, carrying power that answers to no ancient mystical energy? What happens when a warrior who has faced gods and conquered the void between galaxies finds herself in a place where the impossible is merely Tuesday, and Tuesday is occupied by an empire? The first sign was the light. Not hyperspace reversion, every Imperial sensor officer knew that signature by heart. Not a comet or asteroid breaking apart an atmospheric entry. This was something else entirely, a contrail of golden photon energy that screamed across Lothal's dusk sky like a wound torn in reality itself, burning so bright that for 3 full seconds, every viewport on every Star Destroyer in the blockade automatically polarized to protect crew vision. On the bridge of the ISD Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn stood before the forward viewport with his hands clasped behind his back, red eyes tracking the phenomenon with the same analytical precision he applied to art and warfare. Around him, officers scrambled. "Collision alert! Unidentified object entering atmosphere at—" The sensor officer's voice cracked. "Sir, speed is impossible. No heat signature, no mass reading. Energy output is— It's not registering on any known scale." "Curious," Thrawn murmured. His voice carried that peculiar calm that made even veterans nervous. "Track its descent vector, deploy TIE squadrons to the impact site, and summon the Inquisitors." He tilted his head slightly, still watching the falling star. "I suspect the Emperor will want to know about this immediately." The thing, the woman, the force of nature, hit the ground 30 kilometers outside Capital City hard enough to vaporize a 50-meter crater into the plains. No ship, no debris, just her, standing in the center of scorched earth that still glowed red-hot, photon energy crackling across her skin like barely contained lightning. Carol Danvers took a breath and immediately regretted it. The air tasted wrong. Not toxic, her enhanced physiology could handle most atmospheric compositions, but different. There was something in it, something that made her binary energy fluctuate and surge unpredictably. She powered down to standard form, the golden glow fading from her skin, and that helped, marginally. "Okay," she said to the empty crater. That was new. The last thing she remembered clearly was pursuing a Kree warship through an experimental jump point, then nothing. No, not nothing. A pulling sensation, like reality itself had grabbed her and yanked her sideways through dimensions that didn't have names. Her cosmic awareness, usually so precise, was giving her nothing but static and a persistent feeling that she'd traveled much, much farther than any quantum jump should allow. She rose slowly into the air, scanning the horizon. The city in the distance looked wrong, too angular, too utilitarian, and those ships in orbit, massive wedge-shaped behemoths that dwarfed anything the Kree had fielded. Her comm was dead, not damaged, completely incompatible with whatever networks existed here. Even her connection to the quantum bands felt muted, like someone had thrown a blanket over her power source. Then she heard them, the scream of engines that definitely weren't Kree, human, or anything else she'd recognized. 6 fighter craft dropping through the clouds, solar panel wings catching the last light of the setting sun. They moved with aggressive precision, forming an attack pattern she'd seen 1,000 times before in 1,000 different wars. "Unidentified entity, you are in violation of Imperial airspace. Power down and submit to immediate custody or you will be fired upon." Imperial. Great. Carol had dealt with empires before. They all had the same playbook. Show overwhelming force, demand submission, shoot first if anyone looks at them funny. "Here's a better idea," Carol called back, knowing they probably could hear her. "You tell me what planet this is, what year it is, and how I get back to my dimension. Then we can talk about whose airspace belongs to whom." The response was a volley of green energy bolts that looked nothing like plasma weapons or photon cannons. They moved wrong, too slow, too controlled. Carol dodged effortlessly, muscle memory from countless dogfights carrying her through the barrage. She returned fire with a precisely calibrated photon blast, aiming for the lead fighter's wing. The bolt struck true, and the fighter spiraled downward, trailing smoke, but still mostly intact. Carol frowned. That should have vaporized the wing entirely. Her power output was definitely compromised. "All units," the squadron leader's voice crackled. "Target is hostile and extremely dangerous. Authorization to use lethal force. Repeat, lethal force authorized." The TIE fighters swarmed. Carol had fought in space battles against the Kree Armada, gone head-to-head with Skrull warships, and once punched through a Chitauri Leviathan. These primitive fighters with their predictable attack vectors should have been target practice. But there were a lot of them, and whatever was dampening her powers made every blast cost more energy than it should. She destroyed 3 more fighters, carefully, precisely, trying not to kill the pilots even as they tried very hard to kill her, before the sky above her simply opened. Not a portal, not a jump point. The air itself rippled and tore, and through it came a ship that made the fighters look like toys. The wedge-shaped monster hung in the sky like a monument to military dominance, bristling with weapons that were already tracking her. "Last warning," a new voice said. This one was different, cultured, measured, almost curious. "Surrender now, and you will be treated as a prisoner of war. Resist, and the Empire has 4 turbo-laser batteries currently trained on your position. Even something as unusual as you cannot withstand that level of concentrated fire." Carol looked up at the Star Destroyer, looked at the dozen more TIE fighters launching from its hangar bay, looked at the city in the distance that was probably full of civilians who'd get caught in the crossfire if this escalated. She'd been in this position before, outgunned, outpositioned, stuck on an alien world with no backup and no intel. The smart play was tactical retreat, live to fight another day, gather information, find allies. Carol Danvers powered up to binary form, golden energy exploding across her body like a star going nova. The dampening effect fought her, made the transformation take 3 seconds instead of 1, but she forced her way through it. "Tell your Empire," she said, and her voice carried on photon-amplified wavelengths that every comm system in range would pick up crystal clear, "that I'm not anyone's prisoner. I'm Captain Marvel, and I'm just getting started." She shot into space faster than the turbo-lasers could track. The Star Destroyer tried to follow, but Carol had fought in 3 dimensions against enemies who thought in 4. She burned through the blockade like a comet, dodging fire and sending carefully placed blasts into shield generators and sensor arrays, disabling, not destroying, because she still didn't know who the good guys were in this galaxy. But as she broke through the atmosphere and saw the fleet waiting above, dozens of Star Destroyers, hundreds of fighters, a military force that spoke of empire in the truest, ugliest sense, Carol Danvers had a sinking feeling she'd just made some very powerful enemies. Below, on the bridge of the Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn watched her escape trajectory with something that might have been satisfaction. "Fascinating," he said. "Lieutenant, relay to Imperial Center. We have encountered an entity of unknown origin with power comparable to superweapons, extremely hostile to authority. Recommend immediate classification as Priority Alpha threat." He paused. "And inform Lord Vader. I believe the Inquisitorius will find this individual most interesting." In the capital city, tucked into the shadows of an abandoned tower, a man with a scarred face and a lightsaber hidden beneath his coat watched the golden streak vanish into the stars. Kanan Jarrus had felt something in the Force the moment she'd crashed, a void where power existed, but the Force did not touch. Something that made the cosmic energy around it bend and twist in ways that defied every lesson his Jedi Master had taught him. "Hera," he said into his comm, "we need to find that woman before the Empire does, because whatever she is, she's about to change everything." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The hunt had begun. Captain Marvel was alone in a galaxy far, far away, and neither the Empire nor the Rebellion knew what they were dealing with. But they were about to find out. The Outer Rim had 1,000 places to disappear, and Carol Danvers found the emptiest one she could. A debris field orbiting a dead moon, scattered with the wreckage of ships from conflicts she didn't recognize. She powered down to a minimal energy signature and floated among the broken hulls, using the time to think. 3 days. She'd been in this galaxy for 3 days, and every attempt to find a way home had hit the same wall. Her cosmic awareness, the quantum connection that let her navigate between star systems, sense energy patterns across light years, and interface with nearly any technology, was barely functional. It wasn't gone, just muffled, like trying to hear a conversation through 6 feet of water. The energy in this galaxy was wrong, not hostile, but fundamentally incompatible with her power signature. It pressed against her binary form constantly, an invisible resistance that made every flight harder, every blast weaker. She'd tested her limits carefully. At full binary, she could maybe hit 70% of her normal output before the strain became dangerous. At standard enhancement, she was closer to 85%. Still enough to level a city block, still enough to punch through a battleship's hull. But against an empire that fielded fleets of those wedge-shaped destroyers, against whatever technology let those fighters move in ways that defied basic physics, she needed information. She needed allies. She needed. Her heads-up display, projected directly through her neural interface, flashed red. 3 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, incoming fast. Not the wedge-shaped destroyers. These were smaller, sleeker, and their energy signatures read as, she frowned, organic? No, mechanical, but with strange hybrid readings that made no sense. Carol drifted deeper into the debris field and waited. The ships, ugly utilitarian freighters that looked like they'd been assembled from 3 different vessels, began scanning the wreckage. Salvagers, probably. She was about to move on when her audio sensors picked up a transmission. I'm telling you, I felt something here, strong. Not like the Inquisitors, not like anything I felt before. Male voice, human, uncertain, but insistent. Your Force feelings are great, Canon, but we need to focus on the mission. We're supposed to be scouting supply routes, not chasing ghosts. Female voice, accented, tactical. This isn't a ghost, Hera. 3 days ago, something fell from the sky with enough power to make every Force sensitive on Lothal stop breathing. The Empire's tearing apart the Outer Rim looking for it. We find it first. Maybe we find something that can actually hurt them. Force sensitive. The word triggered something in Carol's tactical database, a term she'd heard in the Imperial transmissions she'd been monitoring. Something about mystical energy and ancient warrior monks. Great. She'd landed in a galaxy where magic was apparently real. The ships moved closer, their sensors sweeping through the debris. Carol made a decision. She needed intel, and these people, whatever they were, didn't sound Imperial. She powered up just enough to generate a detectable energy signature, then waited. The lead freighter, an ugly Corellian design with mismatched armor plating, turned sharply toward her position. Its weapons, primitive projectile cannons by the look of them, tracked her hiding spot. Unknown vessel, this is the Ghost. We mean you no harm. We're with the Rebellion, and we're here to help. Rebellion. That word Carol understood in any language. She'd fought alongside rebellions before. Some noble, some doomed, some both. The enemy of her enemy wasn't always her friend, but it was a place to start. She emerged from behind a shattered Corvette hull, hovering in open space, without a ship, without a suit, glowing with barely restrained photon energy. The effect, she knew from experience, was striking. The comm channel went silent for a long moment. Okay, the female voice, Hera, finally said. That's new. 20 minutes later, Carol stood in the Ghost's cargo hold, surrounded by a crew that looked like they'd been assembled from a Revolutionary War recruitment poster. The green-skinned woman at the controls, Twi'lek they'd called her species, kept one hand near her sidearm. The big guy with the mutton chops and attitude problem had a bowcaster aimed casually in her direction. A Mandalorian, she recognized the armor design from the Imperial database she'd skimmed, stood by the exit with arms crossed. But it was the man in the front, the one with the beard and the exhausted eyes, that interested her most. He moved like a fighter, but there was something else. A stillness, a connection to that energy she kept sensing everywhere in this galaxy. "So," Canon Jarrus said carefully, "you're telling us you're from another dimension, another universe entirely, and you just crashed here by accident?" "That's the short version," Carol said. She'd given them the basics, enough to establish credibility without revealing everything. Old habit from military intelligence briefings. "I'm trying to find a way home. That empire of yours seems very interested in preventing that. The Empire's interested in anything that could be weaponized, and you, Captain Marvel, are a walking superweapon. No offense." "None taken. I've been called worse." Carol looked around the cargo hold. "You said you're with a rebellion against this empire. Tell me why I should care." The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Mandalorian, Sabine, she'd said, laughed sharply. "Wow, direct. I like her." "The Empire conquered the galaxy, wiped out the Jedi Order, and slaved an entire species, rules through fear and overwhelming military force. They destroyed an entire planet, Alderaan, billions of people, just to make a point. We're fighting to restore freedom, democracy, hope." Carol had heard similar speeches before. She'd believed some of them, been betrayed by others. "And what do you want from me?" "Information," Hera said bluntly. "You punched through an Imperial blockade like it was tissue paper, took hits from turbo lasers that should have vaporized you. Whatever you are, whatever your power source is, the Empire will study it, weaponize it. We need to understand it first."
"Also," a new voice said, and Carol turned to see a kid, teenager, maybe 16, emerging from the corridor with a droid rolling beside him. "You're not Force-sensitive, but you exist in this weird bubble where the Force just bends around you. Kanan felt it. I felt it. Probably every Inquisitor in the sector felt it too." "Ezra," Kanan said warningly. "What? It's true. She's like a hole in the Force, which is either really useful or really dangerous, and we should probably figure out which." Carol processed that. In her galaxy, enhanced individuals were rare but understood. Here, power apparently came from this mystical force, and she was an anomaly that didn't fit their rules. That made her interesting. It also made her a target. "The Inquisitors," she said. "The Empire mentioned them. What are they?" Kanan's expression darkened. "Dark side Force users, trained to hunt down surviving Jedi. They use the Force to sense, manipulate, and kill. Lightsabers, telekinesis, mind control, they're walking nightmares." "And they're coming for you," Hera added. "Thrawn's already flagged you as priority alpha. That means Vader himself might take an interest." "Vader?" Carol asked. The temperature in the cargo hold seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Darth Vader," Kanan said softly. "The Emperor's enforcer. Most powerful dark side user in the galaxy. He's killed more Jedi than anyone alive. If he comes for you..." He didn't finish the sentence. Carol had faced threats before. Ronan the Accuser, Thanos, the Supreme Intelligence. She'd learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies weren't always the ones with the most firepower. They were the ones who understood how to use power strategically. "Let me be clear. I'm not joining your rebellion. I'm not your weapon, and I'm not your symbol. I need information about this galaxy, technology, FTL travel, dimensional physics, anything that might help me find a way home. You help me with that, and I'll help you where our interests align. That's the deal." "Fair," Hera said after a moment. She extended her hand. "Welcome aboard, Captain. Temporarily." Carol shook it. The Twi'lek's grip was firm, the handshake of someone who'd fought for everything she had. Carol respected that. "One more thing," Kanan said. He was watching her with that unsettling intensity again. "What you did to the Chimera, disabling shots, precision targeting, you could have destroyed it, killed everyone aboard, but you didn't." "I don't kill unless I have to," Carol said simply. "I've seen what happens when power gets used carelessly. I've been that careless. Not anymore." Something shifted in Kanan's expression. Not quite trust, but maybe understanding. "Then maybe we can work together, because the Empire won't show you the same mercy." 3 sectors away, aboard the Superstar Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader stood before a holographic projection of Carol's escape from Lothal. The footage, captured from a dozen different TIE Fighter gun cameras, played on loop. The golden figure dodging turbo laser fire, the precise, devastating counterattacks, the impossible speed. "Most impressive," Darth Vader's mechanical voice intoned. "This power, it is not the Force, yet it rivals the greatest Force users in the galaxy." "Indeed, Lord Vader. My analysis suggests we are dealing with an entirely new form of energy manipulation, dimensional in origin, perhaps. The captive we took from the crash site, a local farmer who witnessed the impact, described her as glowing like a star. Poetic, but potentially accurate." "Where is she now?" "Unknown. Our tracking algorithms estimate she has made contact with rebel elements. The signature matches known rebel operational patterns in the Outer Rim." Vader's fist clenched slowly. "The Empire are no threat. This Captain Marvel could become one. I want the Inquisitors mobilized. 5th brother, 7th sister, 8th brother, all of them. Hunt her. Bring her to me." "And if she resists?" The hologram flickered as Vader turned his masked face towards it. "Then the Inquisitors will learn what happens when you face power that does not bow to the Force. It will be educational." The transmission ended. In the silence of his meditation chamber, Vader reached out through the dark side, searching for the disturbance he'd felt 3 days ago. But where the woman should have been, where any living being should register in the Force, there was nothing. A void, an absence that screamed louder than presence ever could. He'd encountered such voids before, ancient Sith artifacts, Isalamiri creatures, but never in a person, never in something that radiated such raw, undeniable power. "You cannot hide forever," Vader murmured to the empty chamber. "And when we meet, I will know the source of your strength. I will take it." On the Ghost, Carol stood at the viewport, watching hyperspace stream past in impossible blue-white corridors. Kanan had tried to explain it, something about faster-than-light travel through alternate dimensions, but it didn't match any physics she knew. Just another reminder that she was very, very far from home. "You okay?" Ezra asked, appearing beside her with that casual fearlessness only teenagers possessed. "Thinking," Carol said. "In my galaxy, I'm an Avenger, part of a team. We protect Earth and beyond from threats too big for any one person to handle. Here, I don't know what I am." "You're someone who could have vaporized an entire Star Destroyer but chose not to," Ezra said. "That's something. That's a lot, actually." Carol smiled slightly. "You're what, 16? 17? 17, almost 18. When I was your age, I was training to be a pilot. Thought I knew everything." "Yeah, well, I'm getting the crash course," Ezra gestured to the stars beyond. "Kanan's teaching me to be a Jedi, to use the Force, but with the Empire hunting us and the Inquisitors, and now Vader probably coming for you, sometimes I wonder if learning to fight is the same as learning to be good." Carol looked at the kid, really looked at him, saw the doubt and determination warring in his eyes. "They're not the same thing," she said quietly. "Fighting is easy. Being good is choosing not to fight when you still could. It's choosing who to protect and who to save. It's knowing your power doesn't make you right, it just makes you responsible." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, then, "I hope you find your way home, Captain, but if you don't, I'm glad you're on our side, even temporarily." Carol didn't respond, because the truth was, she wasn't sure whose side she was on yet. This galaxy's war wasn't hers. Its conflicts, its history, its complicated politics, none of it was her responsibility. But as the Ghost dropped out of hyperspace near a hidden rebel outpost, and Carol saw the refugee ships clustered around it like desperate birds seeking shelter, something cold settled in her chest. She'd seen this before. Empires that consumed everything, people with nowhere left to run, wars that devoured the innocent while the powerful played their games. And whatever else Carol Danvers was, whatever else Captain Marvel represented, she'd never been able to walk away from people who needed help. Even in a galaxy far, far away.
The rebel base on Atollon was nothing like the military installations Carol knew. No gleaming towers, no reinforced bunkers, no orbital defense platforms. Just prefabricated structures half buried in red desert sand, camouflage sensor arrays, and a makeshift landing field crowded with ships that looked held together by hope and improvisation. It was the kind of base you built when you were losing, when survival mattered more than victory. Carol had seen a dozen rebellions across a dozen worlds. She knew how this story usually ended. "Welcome to Chopper Base," Hera said as the Ghost touched down. "Home sweet home for the Phoenix Squadron. It's not much, but the Empire hasn't found us yet, so it's better than most." Through the viewport, Carol watched rebels moving with practiced efficiency, loading supplies, repairing fighters, drilling combat formations. Most were human, but she spotted dozens of alien species she didn't recognize. What struck her wasn't their diversity, it was their age. Half of them looked barely older than Ezra. "How many?" she asked quietly. "Here? Maybe 400 personnel. Across the entire rebellion." Hera's jaw tightened. "Tens of thousands. Against an empire of trillions. We're not winning, Captain. We're surviving. One day at a time." The cargo ramp lowered, and Carol followed the crew onto the landing field. The binary suns, she'd learned this system had two, beat down with familiar intensity. At least some things were universal. Heat, dust, the smell of overworked machinery and unwashed soldiers living too close together for too long. "Harrison Dula," a woman's voice called out, crisp and commanding. Carol turned to see a human woman approaching, middle-aged with auburn hair pulled back severely, wearing the kind of expression Carol associated with senators and generals. "You were supposed to scout supply routes, not bring home strays." "This isn't a stray, Senator Mothma. This is Captain Marvel, the priority target the Empire's been tearing apart the Outer Rim looking for." Mon Mothma's eyes, sharp, calculating, fixed on Carol with an intensity that made most intelligence officers look amateurish. The report said an unidentified entity destroyed 3 TIE fighters and disabled a Star Destroyer single-handedly. They didn't mention she was human. A pause. "You are human?" "Enhanced human. From another dimension. Long story. Your people gave me the abbreviated version of yours. Empire bad, rebellion good, billions dead, hope in short supply. What do you want from me, Senator?" Mon Mothma's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition of someone else who'd learned to cut through political niceties when time was short and stakes were high. "Walk with me," Mothma said. They moved through the base, Mothma maintaining a careful distance that was neither hostile nor trusting. "The Rebel Alliance," she began, "is built on a simple premise that tyranny cannot stand forever, that freedom is worth fighting for, and that ordinary beings can resist even the greatest evil. We have no superweapons, no vast fleets, no force users beyond a handful of survivors the Inquisitors haven't killed yet. What we have is belief." "Belief doesn't stop turbo laser fire," Carol said. "No, but it keeps you fighting when the turbo lasers come." Mothma stopped at the edge of the landing field, looking out over the desert. The Empire destroyed Alderaan 6 months ago. 2 billion people, vaporized, to demonstrate the power of their Death Star and crush our morale. It should have worked. It should have ended us. But it didn't. Because people saw what the Empire truly was, and they chose to resist anyway. "To you have power beyond anything I've ever seen, Captain Marvel. Power that could turn battles, save lives, maybe even destroy the Death Star itself if the intelligence we're gathering proves accurate. I won't insult you by pretending I don't want that power fighting for us." Carol had been recruited before. By S.H.I.E.L.D., by the Avengers, by the Kree Empire, though that ended badly for everyone involved. She recognized the speech, the appeal to heroism, the subtle pressure, the unspoken reminder of how many lives hung in the balance.
"And if I say no?" Carol asked. "Then you say no," Mothma replied simply. "We don't conscript, we don't coerce. That's what separates us from the Empire. But understand this, the Empire will find you eventually. Thrawn's too smart and Vader's too persistent. When they do, they'll try to capture you, study you, and turn your power into a weapon. If they can't capture you, they'll kill you. Either way, you'll be fighting whether you want to or not." It was the most honest recruitment pitch Carol had ever heard. No false promises, no guarantees of victory, just cold tactical reality delivered with political precision. "I need to think about it," Carol said. "Of course. In the meantime, you're welcome to—" The alarm cut through the desert air like a blade. Red lights flashed across the base. Rebels sprinted to combat stations with the fluid efficiency of people who'd done this too many times before. "Report," Mothma snapped into her comm. "3 Imperial Star Destroyers dropping out of hyperspace. They've got our location. Ground assault incoming. Estimate 40 AT-ATs full Legion support. We have maybe 10 minutes before they're in firing range."
Mothma's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "Begin evacuation protocol. Get the transports loaded. All fighters to defensive positions." She looked at Carol. "I guess you're about to see what belief looks like when it's outgunned 40-1. Carol was already moving toward the landing field. "How many people on this base?" 417, Hera said, falling into step beside her. The Ghost's crew had appeared as if summoned, weapons ready, faces grim. "We've got maybe 6 transports that can carry 100 each. The fighters can buy time, but against 3 Star Destroyers and a full ground assault?" She didn't finish the sentence. The math was brutal. Even if every transport got away clean, and they wouldn't, they'd lose people. Maybe dozens, maybe more. The fighters would be slaughtered buying time for civilians to escape. It was the kind of math Carol had seen on 100 battlefields, the kind that turns soldiers into statistics. "You said the Empire wants to capture me, to study my power." "That's Thrawn's assessment, yes," Mothma said carefully. "But Vader will want me alive too. You don't destroy something unique, you weaponize it." Carol looked up at the sky, where 3 massive wedge-shaped destroyers were growing from dots to dominating presences. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go up there and give them exactly what they want, a demonstration of power. While they're focused on me, you get everyone off this rock, every single person." "That's suicide," Kanan said flatly. 3 Star Destroyers, probably Inquisitors on board, maybe Vader himself. You can't." "Watch me." Carol powered up, golden energy crackling across her skin. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every rebel within 50 meters stopped and stared. "I've fought armadas before. I've gone toe-to-toe with beings who could crack planets. I'm not saying I'll win, but I can damn sure keep them busy." "Why?" Ezra asked. The question cut through the tactical discussion like a laser. "You said this wasn't your fight, that you're not our weapon. Why risk your life for people you just met?" Carol thought about Alderaan, 2 billion people who never got a choice. She thought about refugee ships fleeing from empires that consumed everything. She thought about a girl from Boston who joined the Air Force because she believed some fights were worth having even when you were outgunned. "Because the Empire made it my fight the moment they decided I was something to be captured and weaponized. And because I've been where you are, outgunned, outmatched, fighting because surrender means death or worse. I couldn't walk away from that in my galaxy. I can't walk away from it here." She rose into the air, binary form fully engaged now, a golden star against the red desert sky. "Get your people out. I'll buy you the time." "Captain," Mothma called up, "if you survive this—" "When I survive this," Carol corrected. "If you survive this," Mothma started again, "we'll talk about belief and about what comes after." Carol didn't respond. She was already accelerating, punching through the atmosphere hard enough to leave a sonic boom in her wake. Behind her, the evacuation began in earnest, transports powering up, fighters scrambling, rebels moving with desperate efficiency. Above, the Star Destroyers hung in orbit like gray daggers pointed at the heart of hope itself.
Carol's cosmic awareness, still muffled, still struggling against whatever effort-saturated energy this galaxy, gave her basic tactical data. 3 ships, complement of 72 TIE fighters each, turbo-laser batteries that could level cities, tractor beams strong enough to hold capital ships, and somewhere on those vessels, Force users who could manipulate reality itself, who'd killed warrior monks and hunted survivors for sport. "All right," Carol said to the Void. "You want a demonstration? Let's make it one you'll never forget." She hit the lead destroyer at 70% combat speed, photon energy blazing around her like a comet's tail. The shields flared, absorbed the impact, and for a moment, Carol felt genuine surprise. These weren't energy shields like she knew. They were something else, something that bent physics in ways that reminded her uncomfortably of the Tesseract's reality-warping effects. So she hit them again, and again, and again, hammering the same spot with precisely focused proton blasts until the shields overloaded and she punched through. The destroyer's hull was thick, armored, and Carol tore into it like tissue paper. Not the reactor, she wouldn't kill thousands to save hundreds, but the weapon systems, the sensor arrays, the hangar bays, surgical strikes that would cripple without catastrophic casualties. Alarms screeched across all 3 destroyers. TIE fighters poured out like angry insects. Carol dodged the first wave, destroying 3 with precise shots, then dove toward the surface to draw them away from the transports now struggling into orbit. "Target acquired," a cold mechanical voice said across Imperial frequencies. "All units converge. Capture is preferred. Termination is acceptable." The TIEs swarmed. Carol had fought swarms before, Chitauri, Kree fighters, Skrull interceptors, but these pilots were good, coordinated in ways that suggested either extensive training or some kind of neural link. They boxed her in, forced her into firing solutions, made her waste energy on evasive maneuvers. She was destroying them, 2 here, 3 there, another 5 in a perfectly executed barrel roll, but more kept coming, and the destroyers were adjusting their tactics, using tractor beams to create kill boxes, coordinating turbo laser fire that even Carol's speed couldn't completely avoid. A blast caught her left side. Pain exploded through enhanced nerves. The shields had hurt more than she had expected, and her power levels were draining faster than they should. The force interference, the constant energy expenditure, the sheer volume of fire, it was adding up. Carol checked her internal chronometer. 7 minutes since the evacuation began. She needed 3 more, just 3 more minutes for the transports to clear the gravity well and jump to hyperspace. That's when she felt it, not with her cosmic awareness, but with something deeper, more primal, a presence that made the void itself seem to recoil. Darkness given form and purpose, approaching with inexorable certainty. A shuttle emerged from the largest destroyer's hangar, flanked by TIE fighters in a protective formation, and on that shuttle, Carol knew with absolute certainty, was something far more dangerous than turbo lasers or tractor beams. The Force users had arrived, and they'd brought friends. "Transport Group Delta 7, you are clear for hyperspace jump," Hera's voice crackled over the rebel channel. "All groups, 90 seconds to minimum safe distance." 90 seconds. Carol could do 90 seconds. The shuttle opened, and 4 figures in black armor emerged from the shuttle, lightsabers igniting in the void. They moved through space like it was air, propelled by some invisible force, crimson blades spinning in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so obviously lethal. Behind them, in the shuttle's doorway, stood a figure in black mask and cape. Even at this distance, even through the void of space, Carol felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. Darth Vader had come to claim his prize, and Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, cosmically powered Avenger from another dimension entirely, was about to learn what happened when unstoppable force met immovable darkness.
The Inquisitors moved through space with unnatural grace, propelled by the Force in ways that violated every law of physics Carol understood. They spread out in a tactical formation, 2 flanking high, 2 sweeping low, crimson lightsabers spinning like deadly propellers.
Carol had fought in vacuum before, had learned to use photon propulsion for three-dimensional combat against enemies who thought in 4 dimensions, but she'd never fought warrior monks who could manipulate reality itself. "Surrender," the lead Inquisitor's voice came through on an open channel, female and cold. "The Empire offers clemency to those who submit willingly." Carol's response was a photon blast that vaporized the space where the woman had been a microsecond earlier. The Inquisitor had moved, not dodged, but displaced herself through space as if distance was a suggestion rather than a rule. "Hostile confirmed," the lead Inquisitor said. "5th brother, 8th brother, flank and contain. 7th sister, with me. Lethal force authorized." They came at her like a choreographed dance of death. Carol had fought Kree accusers, had gone hand-to-hand with Thanos' children, but this was different. The Inquisitors didn't just fight in space, they fought with it, using the Force to redirect her blasts, to predict her movements, to turn her own momentum against her. The 5th brother, massive, heavy, swung his lightsaber in a wide arc. Carol dodged, but the blade extended on a spinning mechanism she hadn't anticipated, catching her across the shoulder. White-hot pain exploded through her nervous system. The lightsaber hadn't just cut, it had burned, the plasma blade interacting with her photon energy matrix in ways that sent feedback cascading through her entire power system. Carol retaliated with a full-power blast that sent the 5th brother spiraling toward the nearest Star Destroyer. But the 7th sister was already there, lightsaber spinning impossibly fast, and Carol felt something grab her. Not physically, something invisible, crushing, like a giant fist made of pure force closing around her chest. Telekinesis. Of course they had telekinesis. Carol channeled photon energy into a spherical burst, breaking the grip through sheer output. The sister flew backward, but the 8th brother, a Tyrellian with cybernetic enhancements, was already swinging for her head. Carol caught the lightsaber blade with her hand, photon energy shielding her palm, and pulled. The brother came with his weapon, surprised, and Carol's headbutt sent him cartwheeling through the void. "Interesting," a new voice said, and Carol's blood went cold. Darth Vader floated between her and the Star Destroyers, lightsaber unignited, cape somehow billowing despite the vacuum. He was massive, armored, and radiated a presence that made the Inquisitors look like candles next to a bonfire. "You fight well," Vader continued, his mechanical voice carrying clearly over comms. "But you do not understand the power you face. The Force is not mere energy to be countered or absorbed. It is the fabric of reality itself." "Yeah?" Carol said, buying time. 60 seconds until the last transport cleared gravity well. "I've heard that speech before, usually from people who ended up learning that their supreme power looks a lot less supreme after I punched them through a mountain." Vader's head tilted slightly. "Your confidence is admirable. Let us see if it is justified." He moved. Carol had fought speedsters. She'd gone hand-to-hand with beings who could cross solar systems in heartbeats. But Vader's speed wasn't physical, it was spatial. One moment he was 50 meters away, the next his lightsaber was at her throat, the crimson blade humming with lethal promise. Carol blocked with a photon shield, the energies clashing in a shower of golden and red sparks. Vader pressed, and Carol felt the difference immediately. The Inquisitors had been skilled. Vader was absolute. Every movement precise, every strike calculated. He wasn't trying to kill her. He was testing her, measuring her capabilities like a scientist studying a new specimen. Carol threw a punch that would have cratered a moon. Vader caught it, actually caught it in his palm, and the impact shockwave rippled out across space hard enough to shatter the viewports of nearby TIE fighters. "Impressive," Vader said. "Your strength rivals that of Force users who have trained for decades, but strength alone." Carol hit him with a point-blank photon blast that lit up the void like a miniature sun. Vader's armor absorbed most of it, but she felt the impact throw him back. She pressed the advantage, unleashing a barrage of precisely targeted blasts that would have destroyed a cruiser. Vader raised one hand. The blasts stopped, frozen in space like insects in amber. Carol stared. She'd seen energy manipulation before, but this was different. The photon bolts hung in the void, held by nothing but Vader's will, then slowly, impossibly began to reverse course. The Force encompasses all things. Even your alien power bows to its dominion. The blasts came back at double speed. Carol dodged, but 3 caught her. Chest, side, leg. Her own power turned against her. Pain flooded through her nervous system, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Carol felt genuine fear. Not of dying, she'd faced death before, but of being helpless, of encountering a power so fundamentally different from anything in her experience that her cosmic abilities were just inadequate. "All transports have jumped to hyperspace," Hera's voice crackled in her ear. She'd given the rebels her comm frequency before ascending. "Carol, get out of there. You've done enough." But Carol couldn't move. Vader's telekinetic grip had her now, crushing, irresistible. She poured photon energy into breaking free, but it was like fighting gravity itself. The more she struggled, the tighter the invisible bonds became. "Magnificent," Vader said, floating closer. "You are no Force user, yet you wield power comparable to the greatest Jedi Masters. The Emperor will be most interested in understanding how." The Inquisitors had regrouped, forming a perimeter. TIE fighters boxed her in. The Star Destroyers had repositioned, tractor beams locking on. Carol was trapped, and every tactical scenario she could calculate ended the same way: capture, interrogation, weaponization. She'd failed. Not at saving the rebels, they had escaped, but at understanding what she was up against. This wasn't the Kree Empire or the Chitauri. This was a galaxy where mystical energy was as real and dangerous as any weapon, where dark warrior monks could manipulate reality, and where her cosmic powers were just one more form of energy to be studied and controlled. Carol made a decision. She stopped fighting Vader's grip, stopped resisting, let her binary form fully manifest, let every joule of photon energy she'd been holding in reserve flood through her system. Her body became pure light, so bright that the Star Destroyer's sensors overloaded, so hot that the vacuum around her began to ionize. "What are you?" Carol started. Carol detonated. Not a blast, not an explosion. A pure photon energy release that turned her into a miniature star for exactly 1.7 seconds. The Inquisitors were thrown like leaves in a hurricane. TIE fighters vaporized. Even Vader's telekinetic grip broke as he was forced to divert all his power to shielding himself. And in that moment of chaos, Carol moved. Not away, toward. Straight at Vader, accelerating through the dissipating energy, fist cocked back for a punch that would either end this or kill her trying. Vader saw her coming. His lightsaber came up in a guard position that was textbook perfect. But Carol had fought for 30 years, had learned from the best warriors in multiple galaxies, and she knew one universal truth. Even the perfect defense had a weakness if you hit it hard enough and fast enough. Her fist connected with Vader's chest plate. The impact created a shockwave visible from the planet's surface. Vader actually flew backward, tumbling through space, his armor cracked, his mechanical breathing stuttering. Carol felt 3 ribs break from the recoil, felt her power levels drop to critical, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She caught Vader before he could recover, grabbed his cape, and used her remaining momentum to throw him. Not at the Star Destroyers, at the planet below. Vader became a meteor, burning through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and fury. Carol watched long enough to see him impact in the desert 20 kilometers from the evacuated base, then turned her attention to the Inquisitors. "Tell your Empire," she said, voice amplified across every Imperial frequency, "that Captain Marvel doesn't get captured, she doesn't get studied, and she sure as hell doesn't get weaponized. Next time you come for me, bring a bigger army." Then she jumped. Not to hyperspace, she still didn't understand that technology, but she could travel faster than light through normal space if she pushed hard enough. It would drain her completely, leave her vulnerable for hours, but she'd be gone before the Star Destroyers could regroup. Carol Danvers became a golden streak across the stars, leaving behind 3 damaged Star Destroyers, 4 injured Inquisitors, and Darth Vader climbing out of a crater with a cracked helmet and a newfound respect for beings who fought without the Force. On the bridge of the Executor, safely distant from the battle, Grand Admiral Thrawn watched the tactical recordings with his characteristic calm. Beside him, a holographic projection of Emperor Palpatine flickered with barely contained fury. "She defeated Vader, threw him like a toy," the Emperor hissed. "She surprised him," Thrawn corrected gently. "Lord Vader was testing her capabilities. He now understands what he faces. The next encounter will be different." "There will be no next encounter," Palpatine snarled. "This being, this Captain Marvel, she represents a threat to everything we have built. She must be eliminated immediately." "With respect, my Emperor, elimination may prove more difficult than capture." Thrawn gestured to the recording, where Carol's photon detonation was frozen in mid-burst. "Observe the energy output. It rivals a turbo-laser barrage compressed in 2 seconds. And more significantly, observe what happens when Lord Vader attempts to contain it." The recording showed Vader's force grip breaking, his concentration shattered by the sheer output. "The Force affects her differently," Thrawn continued. "She exists in a state of quantum flux that the Force can influence but not dominate. She is not Force-sensitive, yet she cannot be fully controlled through the Force. A fascinating paradox." "What do you recommend?" Palpatine asked, voice dangerously quiet. "Patience. Study. She has allied herself with the rebels, temporarily perhaps, but aligned nonetheless. Let them believe they have gained a powerful weapon. Watch where she goes, learn her patterns, and when the moment is right," Thrawn smiled, "we will have prepared the perfect trap. Not a confrontation of power, but one of strategy." The Emperor considered this. "Very well, Admiral. You have 1 month. If she remains free after that, I will send Vader with an armada and orders to glass every planet she's touched. Are we clear?" "Perfectly, my Emperor." The hologram vanished. Thrawn turned back to the recordings, replaying Carol's fight with analytical precision. Yes, she was powerful, but power could be countered, predicted, contained. All it required was the right approach. 16 hours later, Carol crashed, quite literally, into an asteroid field in an uncharted system. Her binary form had burned out completely. Her cosmic energy reserves were at 7%. Her enhanced healing was working overtime on 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and burns across 40% of her body from feedback damage. She'd won. The rebels had escaped. She'd gone toe-to-toe with the Empire's greatest weapon and survived. So why did it feel like she'd just lost something critical? Carol found a hollow in one of the larger asteroids, carved out a small chamber with the last dregs of her proton energy, and collapsed. Her body demanded rest. Her mind demanded answers. She'd fought Darth Vader, actually traded blows with a being who could manipulate reality through sheer force of will. She'd won that exchange, but barely, and only through surprise and desperate tactics.
Next time, and there would be a next time, he'd be prepared. And the Empire knew about her now, really knew. They'd seen her limits, her power output, her fighting style. Thrawn, whoever he was, would be analyzing every second of that battle, finding weaknesses, planning counters. Carol came to this galaxy by accident. She'd tried to stay neutral, to focus only on finding a way home. But the Empire made that impossible. They'd forced her hand, pushed her into a corner, and she'd responded the only way she knew, by fighting back. Now she was at war. Not the war she'd wanted, not the war she'd prepared for, but a war nonetheless. "Okay," Carol said to the empty asteroid. "Okay, so I can't go home yet. I can't stay neutral, and I've just made the most powerful empire in the galaxy my personal enemy. Great, just great." She closed her eyes, letting her healing factor work, trying to ignore the persistent wrongness of this galaxy's energy pressing against her consciousness. Somewhere out there, the Rebel Alliance was celebrating their escape. Somewhere else, the Empire was planning retribution. And somewhere in between, Captain Marvel was learning that some battles choose you, whether you're ready or not. She'd saved 400 people today, but in doing so, she'd revealed herself to a galaxy that didn't understand her, couldn't measure her, and now would stop at nothing to either capture or destroy her. Carol had faced impossible odds before, had fought gods and monsters and empires. But as she drifted into exhausted sleep in a cold asteroid hollow light years from home, she couldn't shake the feeling that in this galaxy, she'd finally met her match. Not in Vader, not in the Empire, but in the Force itself, that strange, pervasive energy that touched everything except her, that made her an anomaly, an outsider, a void in the fabric of reality. And voids, Carol knew, had a tendency to be filled, whether she liked it or not.
3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Atollon. That's what the rebels were calling it now. 3 weeks of hiding in the Outer Rim, moving between forgotten systems and abandoned stations, while the Empire tore apart entire sectors looking for her. Carol had learned to minimize her energy signature, to stay powered down unless absolutely necessary, to move like a ghost through a galaxy that was hunting her with increasing desperation. She'd also learned that the Rebel Alliance wasn't just a military resistance, it was a cause, fueled by people who'd lost everything and chosen to fight anyway. She'd met refugees from Alderaan who carried their dead planet's memory like a wound that would never heal. She'd seen farmers turned soldiers, learning to fire blasters because the Empire had burned their crops and enslaved their children. She'd watched Hera Syndulla plan missions with the calm certainty of someone who knew she was probably going to die, but refused to let that stop her. It reminded her of the Avengers, not the powers or the fame, but the core truth beneath it all. Some fights were worth having, even when you were outmatched. Especially when you were outmatched. "Intel just came through," Cannon said, materializing beside her in the Ghost's common area. Carol had been studying a datapad, trying to understand this galaxy's physics, looking for any dimensional anomaly that might be a doorway home. "The Empire's moving something big, a massive energy signature heading toward the Scarif system." "Scarif?" Carol looked up. "That's the planet with the Imperial Data Facility, right? Where they keep construction plans and strategic intelligence?" "Yeah, which means whatever they're moving there, it's important." Kanan sat down across from her, and Carol noticed the perpetual exhaustion in his eyes. This was a man who'd been running for years, training a Padawan while fighting a war, and the weight of it was visible in every line of his face. Command thinks it might be related to the Death Star project. Carol had learned about the Death Star over the past 3 weeks, a battle station the size of a small moon, capable of destroying planets with a single shot, the weapon that had murdered Alderaan, the Empire's ultimate symbol of power through fear. "They're building another one?" Carol asked. "We don't know, but there's a team going to Scarif to steal whatever intelligence they can get. Rogue One, they're calling themselves."
Mon Mothma wants to know if you'll go with them. As what? Their personal superweapon? As someone who might be able to get past defenses that would shred our normal forces. Kanan's voice was careful, not quite asking, not quite demanding. Look, I know you didn't sign up for this. You've already saved hundreds of lives. You don't owe us anything more. But, Carol prompted, but if the Empire's moving something critical to Scarf, it means they're worried we might steal it, which means it's valuable enough to risk everything for. Kanan leaned forward. Carol, I felt something in the Force 3 days ago, a convergence, a moment where the whole galaxy balances on a single point. I think Scarf is that point. I think what happens there determines whether this rebellion survives or dies. Carol had spent 3 weeks trying to stay detached, trying to remember this wasn't her galaxy, wasn't her war. But she'd also spent 3 weeks watching the Empire hunt her like an animal, watching them destroy ships and stations just because she might have been there. The Empire had made her part of this war whether she wanted to or not. And she'd seen the Death Star intelligence, seen the casualty projections if it remained operational. Billions, potentially trillions, if the Empire decided to make examples of enough planets. When do we leave? Carol asked. The assault on Scarf was already in progress when the Ghost dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Carol stood in the cargo bay, wearing a rebel flight suit over her uniform, not because it made her less conspicuous, at least until she powered up. Through the viewport, she could see the Shield Gate, a massive orbital station that projected an energy barrier around the entire planet. Nothing got through that shield without Imperial clearance. Below it, Scarf's tropical surface was dotted with Imperial installations, the most prominent being the Citadel Tower, a massive data facility that reached towards the sky like a steel finger. Rebel fleet is engaging the Imperial Star Destroyers. Ground team is pinned down at the Citadel. They've got the data, but they can't transmit through the shield. Someone needs to hit that shield gate hard enough to create an opening. How hard is hard enough? Carol asked. The shield's gates are rated to withstand capital ship weapons fire. You'd need to... Hera paused, turning to look at Carol. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I punched through a Star Destroyer shields 3 weeks ago. How much tougher can this gate be? A lot tougher. And it's got 2 Star Destroyers protecting it, plus fighter squadrons, plus point defense systems. Hera's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many friends die doing impossible things. Then it's a good thing I'm really hard to kill, Carol said, moving towards the cargo ramp. Get me close enough to make a run at the gate. Once I breach the shields, the Rebel fleet can target the reactor. That should give your ground team the opening they need to transmit. And what about you? Ezra asked. He'd been quiet until now, watching Carol with that unsettling teenage intensity. You breach the shields, you'll be right in the middle of the explosion when that reactor goes. I've survived worse, Carol said. It wasn't entirely true, but confidence was 90% of tactics. Besides, I've got a personal grudge against people who blow up planets. May the Force be with you, Captain Marvel, Kanan said. Carol smiled. I've got something better than the Force. I've got a really bad temper and a personal grudge against people who blow up planets. The space battle over Scarf was chaos incarnate. Rebel ships, smaller, faster, more desperate, swarmed around Imperial Star Destroyers like insects attacking predators. X-Wings and Y-Wings strafed TIE fighters. Capital ships traded turbo-laser fire in massive exchanges of energy that lit up the void. And in the center of it all, the shield gate hung like an impenetrable wall between the rebels and their objective.
Sharp, cineatic, confident. Carol launched from the Ghost at combat speed, binary form fully manifested. She'd learned to manage her power more efficiently over the past 3 weeks, to work with this galaxy's strange energy instead of fighting against it. She wasn't at full capacity, might never be in this Force-saturated reality, but she was enough. The TIE fighters saw her coming and adjusted immediately. Carol had developed a reputation over the past 3 weeks. Imperial pilots had learned to fear the golden light that moved through space like a living weapon. They scattered, tried to box her in, failed.
Carol destroyed 6 fighters in as many seconds, then turned her attention to the shield gate. The structure was massive, easily 2 kilometers across, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Its shields shimmered with the telltale distortion of high-output energy barriers. Carol had breached shields before. The trick was finding the resonance frequency, matching her photon energy to the shield's wavelength, then pushing until something broke. She hit the shields at 80% speed, channeling photon energy into a focused, piercing beam. The shields held. Carol pulled back, adjusted her frequency, tried again, still holding. "Captain Marvel," a calm, measured voice said over Imperial frequencies, "I wondered when you would appear." Carol's blood went cold. She knew that voice. A shuttle emerged from the nearest Star Destroyer, flanked by a full squadron of TIE interceptors, and standing in the shuttle's open bay, cape billowing in the void, was Darth Vader. "We meet again," Vader continued. "You have proven difficult to track, but I knew you would eventually reveal yourself. The rebels' desperation is predictable, as is their reliance on you." "Come to get thrown into another planet?" Carol shot back, but her attention was divided now, half on the shield gate, half on Vader and his escorts. "I came to show you the futility of resistance." Vader gestured, and Carol felt it, that telekinetic grip stronger than before, more refined, he'd learned from their last encounter. "You fight for a rebellion that cannot win, for people who will use your power until it burns you hollow. Surrender. Join the Empire. Together we could bring order to a galaxy drowning in chaos." Carol had heard recruitment speeches before, from the Kree, from S.H.I.E.L.D. when they'd wanted her as a weapon instead of a person. The words changed, but the core remained the same. "Give us your power, and we'll give you purpose." "I've got purpose. It's called a free will. You should try it sometime." She hit the shield gate again, pouring everything she had into the attack. The shields buckled, energy bleeding through in sparking cascades. Almost there, just a little more. Vader moved. He crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat, lightsaber igniting mid-flight. Carol dodged, but Vader wasn't aiming for her. He was aiming for the shield gate's emitter array, the same weak point Carol had been targeting. His lightsaber carved through the damaged section, but instead of helping, it triggered a feedback loop. The shield surged, stabilized, then strengthened. Carol stared in disbelief. "Did you truly believe that we would leave such an obvious weakness unguarded? Grand Admiral Thrawn predicted you would attempt this. The shield gate has been modified specifically to counter your energy signature. Every attack you make strengthens it." It was a trap, a perfect calculated trap. They'd let her come here, knowing she'd try to breach the shields, knowing it would fail. Carol looked down at Scarif, at the Citadel Tower, where rebels were dying holding on to stolen data they couldn't transmit, at the rebel fleet being systematically destroyed by Star Destroyers they couldn't overcome, at a battle that was already lost before it began. She'd failed. Not through lack of power or determination, but through exactly the mistake Thrawn had predicted, believing her cosmic abilities made her invincible. The Empire had studied her, adapted, and turned her greatest strength into her critical weakness. "It's over," Vader said. His lightsaber hummed with quiet menace. "Surrender, or watch everyone here die knowing you could have saved them." Carol's mind raced through scenarios. She could fight Vader, but that would take time and energy she didn't have. She could try to destroy the shield gate through brute force, but Thrawn's modifications meant that it would take longer than the rebel fleet could survive. She could... Wait. The shield gate used energy barriers, modified to absorb and counter her photon blasts. But what if she wasn't trying to blast through them? What if she became the energy? It was insane. It would mean converting herself into pure photon radiation and attempting to pass through the shields as raw energy. She'd have maybe 3 seconds before her molecular cohesion failed permanently. 3 seconds to breach a barrier designed specifically to stop her. 3 seconds either to save the rebellion or scatter herself across space as disconnected particles.
"I need you to do something for me," Carol said into her comm, broadcasting to the rebel fleet. "Carol?" Hera's voice came back, strained. "What are you doing?" "Something stupid. When you see the shields drop, and I mean the instant they drop, fire everything you have at the shield gate's reactor. Don't wait, don't hesitate, just fire." "Carol!" "Tell Mon Mothma she was right about belief." Carol looked at Vader, at the Empire, at a galaxy built on fear and oppression. "Tell her sometimes belief looks like someone jumping into the impossible and hoping physics bends before they do." She didn't wait for a response. Carol released her binary form, letting her physical structure begin to dissolve into pure photon energy. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than anything she'd experienced. Her consciousness is fragmenting, her sense of self scattering across wavelengths and frequencies. For a terrible moment, she was everywhere and nowhere, a pattern of light without form or purpose. Then she hit the shields. The modified barrier tried to absorb her, to strengthen from her energy, but Carol wasn't attacking, she was passing through, riding the energy currents like a surfer riding a wave, letting the modifications do exactly what they were designed for, accept and integrate her photon signature. For 2.7 seconds, Captain Marvel existed as a distributed energy pattern across the entire shield gate. She saw, felt, experienced the gate systems from the inside, saw the reactors powering the shields, saw the control nodes managing the planetary barrier, saw the elegant trap Thrawn had designed, and saw how to break it. Carol reformed, partially, desperately, inside the shield gate's command center. Alarms shrieked. Imperial officers reached for weapons. She didn't have time to be gentle. One photon blast, carefully calculated, hit the primary control node. The shields flickered, went down for exactly 1.3 seconds. The rebel fleet fired. Every turbolaser, every proton torpedo, every ion cannon, a concentrated barrage that turned the shield gate's reactor into a miniature supernova. Carol tried to escape, tried to rebuild her photon matrix enough to fly clear, but she'd pushed too far, converted too much of herself into energy. Her molecular cohesion was failing. She was dying, coming apart at the quantum level, and there was nothing. The Force caught her. Not Vader, someone else, multiple someones, their combined will reaching out through the mystical energy that permeated this galaxy, grabbing hold of Carol's fragmenting consciousness and pulling, holding her together through sheer, determined faith. Carol reformed in the Ghost's cargo bay, collapsed on the deck, every nerve on fire. Kanan stood over her, hands stretched out, face pale with effort. Ezra beside him is doing the same, and through the Force connection they'd temporarily established, they felt them, felt Ahsoka Tano on a distant planet, felt other surviving Jedi reaching across the stars, felt Mon Mothma's belief and Hera's hope, and every single rebel who dared to think they could win. "The data's transmitting," Hera shouted from the cockpit. "The ground team did it. They got the Death Star plans through." Carol lay on the cold deck plates, watching through the viewport as the shield gate exploded in a beautiful, terrible flower of light, watched Star Destroyers begin their retreat, watched the rebel fleet, battered, broken, but victorious, secure the transmission. "Did we win?" Carol asked weakly. Yeah, Captain. We won."
The rebellion would call it the Battle of Scarif. They would remember the ground team, Rogue One, who'd stolen the Death Star plans but never lived to see them transmitted. They would remember the pilots who'd given their lives to buy those crucial seconds. And they would remember Captain Marvel, the golden warrior from another dimension who'd turned herself into living energy to breach an unbreakable barrier. Carol Danvers spent 2 weeks in a rebel medical facility, her quantum matrix slowly rebuilding, her connection to her powers tenuous and uncertain. The doctors, as much as this galaxy had doctors who understood cosmic-powered beings, said she'd come within seconds of complete molecular disintegration. That she'd survived was due to the Force users who'd held her together when physics would have let her scatter. She was alive. The rebellion had the Death Star plans, and somewhere in Imperial space, Thrawn and Vader were recalculating their strategies for dealing with an enemy who refused to follow their predictions. Mon Mothma visited on the 13th day. She sat beside Carol's bed in the medical bay and said simply, "Thank you." "I didn't do it for thanks," Carol said. "I did it because someone had to, and because I've been running from empires my whole life. Figured it was time to stand and fight." "Will you stay?" Mothma asked. "Not as a weapon, as an ally, as a friend to the cause." Carol looked out the viewport at the stars, so similar to her galaxy stars, yet fundamentally different in ways she was still learning to understand. She'd come to this galaxy by accident. She'd tried to stay neutral, to find a way home, but the Empire had made that impossible. They'd forced her to choose, and she'd chosen the only thing that made sense, fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. "I'll stay," Carol said, "until I find a way home or until this war ends, whichever comes first." Mothma nodded. "Then perhaps there's hope after all, for all of us." In Imperial space, Grand Admiral Thrawn studied the Scarif recordings for the 347th time. He'd miscalculated. Not greatly, his trap had nearly worked, but nearly meant failure when facing an enemy who could transform themselves into pure energy to escape certain death. "Fascinating," he murmured. "You are full of surprises, Captain Marvel, but every surprise reveals a pattern, and patterns can be predicted." He would wait, he would watch, and when the moment was right, he would spring a trap that accounted for every variable, every possibility, every impossible thing this dimensional anomaly might attempt. Patience, that was the key to defeating the impossible. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Luke Skywalker, a young man who just received plans to the Death Star and didn't yet know his own destiny, looked up at the binary sunset of Tatooine and felt a disturbance in the Force. Something powerful, something that didn't belong but was somehow exactly where it needed to be. "What is it?" his aunt asked. "I don't know," Luke said, "but I think everything's about to change." He was right. Captain Marvel had fallen into the Star Wars galaxy by accident. She'd fought the Empire out of necessity, and she'd saved the rebellion because some fights were worth having, even in a galaxy far, far away. The Force had never encountered anything quite like her, a void in its cosmic tapestry, a warrior whose power came from beyond its reach, a woman who'd punched gods and survived. And as the rebellion began planning the assault on the Death Star, an assault made possible by plans stolen at terrible cost, Carol Danvers realized something profound. Maybe she hadn't fallen into this galaxy by accident. Maybe the Force, in its infinite mystery, had pulled her here. Because sometimes the galaxy needed something it couldn't create on its own. Sometimes it needed someone who'd learned that power without purpose was just destruction. Someone who'd learned that the greatest strength wasn't in cosmic abilities or mystical energy, but in choosing to fight for others when you could easily walk away. Sometimes it needed an Avenger, and Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, cosmically powered warrior from a dimension beyond the stars, would be that Avenger until the last battle was fought, the last empire fell, or she found her way home, whichever came first. The galaxy would remember her name, and the Empire would learn that some powers couldn't be contained, controlled, or conquered. They could only be respected, or destroyed trying.